This is the Note Closer Show, where you get the latest developments in distressed note investing and learn the secrets of how you can control millions of dollars worth of property for pennies on the dollar. Get educated and entertained by someone who has closed thousands of deals and lives to support you in achieving the same. Now, here's your host, CEO of We Close Notes, Scott Carson.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Note Closer Show. As always, Scott Carson, excited to be here with you today. I'm even more jacked up today. We're filming this. It's the first part of February. 2020 is already a 12th of the year gone. And you got to believe that if you haven't done what you need to, if you can start putting into place the things that you need to do to really make 2020 your year, you need to do it now. You got to waken up, wake up that inner beast out there. And so I am excited to have our special guest. Hopefully will awaken the alphas inside of you guys out there this morning or this afternoon or this evening, whenever you guys are watching it. And I'm talking about my fellow icon of influence, a buddy of mine that I met at New Media Summit and had the pleasure to hang out with him a couple times. And this guy, his energy is just contagious, and he's a rock star out there. And if you don't know him, you need to start following this guy because this guy's doing some big things. And I'm talking about Adam Lewis Walker. And he's a leadership TEDx speaker, two-time best-selling author and coach. He hosts a top-ranked podcast, Awaken Your Alpha, interviewing the world's elite minds in over 380 episodes since 2014. He helps aspiring TEDx speakers to achieve their own talk through his TalkXcelerator Program and complimentary TalkXcelerator Podcast. You want to check that out, guys. Great stuff. A former teacher, international pole vaulter. He was actually working towards the Olympics when his career was cut short by a freak accident. So Adam gave the talk, Awaken Your Alpha, How to Rise Up, and has been featured in the Huffington Post, ESPN, Podfest, Influencers Radio, and many, many more. So we're honored today to have our buddy Adam Lewis Walker join us here on the Note Closer Show. What's going on, Adam?
Hey, lots. I'm talking to you. That was an awesome introduction. Thank you so much. I'm excited to speak to you. Always a good time. And loving, every time I speak to you, I learn a lot as well.
Well, same here, man. I mean, that's the thing. That's the beautiful thing, I think, is when we get alphas in a room, we learn from each other and share ideas. And that's what I love about the podcasting community is it's really a great share because there's enough, there's enough market for everybody, right?
Definitely. And talk about like some of our podcasts. I mean, yours very specific, the Note Closers Show. I love that. Stuff like that inspired me for stuff like the TalkXcelerator Podcast, because it's just about TEDx, not even just TEDx talks, land in your TEDx talk. And we only interview TEDx speakers and organizers. And so I like the fact that, some people will love it and some people will rightly so be like, what's the point in that? There's nothing to do with me. So I love that.
Good stuff. Same here, man. Well, one of the things I wanted to talk with you about a little bit is like I was talking about before introduction. So many people are excited about the new year, and we spent a lot of time leading up to the new decade. Like, hey, if you're not changing things, changing what you're doing on a day in, day out basis, the new year is not going to change for you. And from talking with so many investors and so many of our students, a lot of people feel like they're going through a bit of a pivot. And you went through a major one, going from being hopefully an Olympic athlete to having to kind of change your focus. You want to talk about kind of the mindset behind that and what kind of led up to helping you come up with Awaken Your Alpha? Yeah,
definitely. So I was always inspired by the Olympic Games from a young age, and that was kind of the goal, the aspiration. I didn't really think about it too much, but it was always like, I'd love to do that. And the specific details of like what sport would be a key thing or what event I would, it was just getting there in any shape or form. It's the dedication. And I love the variety of the Olympics and all the countries coming and the whole sort of ethos behind it, that mind, body, and spirit. And so I find myself into pole vault. I was a basketball player as well, but some people say I'm a little bit too short to be a basketball player. What did they know, hey? Back then I was young, people do influence you massively. So that kind of unfortunately killed that a little bit. But so if I should have listened to and been inspired by Spud Webb and people like that. I should have
Muggsy Bogues.
Oh, Muggsy Bogues. I love that guy. Anyway, sidetrack. So I get into, I'm 28 years old, get into my biggest competition, UK final. It's summertime. English summertime, so it's horizontal rain, and I'm on paper, I'm like, I've done my best is to get into this competition. I'm one of the ones you're not expecting to feature in the medals. But because the conditions are awful, or I should say the reality of England or reality of life, then it's more of a level playing field. The guys who are, in ideal conditions, technically on paper, who should turn up and smash it, as in life, as in like, business and podcasts, or who's the cleverest, doesn't always work out. So I handled the bad conditions well. I was in 4th place going for a medal. There's only 4 of us left. It's because obviously a pole vault is elimination as the bar goes higher. So I needed to do something more. I kind of reached the end of what I could get on that pole. So I pulled out a bigger pole. Sounds a bit weird, but I pulled out a bigger pole, the one I use in good conditions, and attempted to use it in bad conditions. I slipped on takeoff in a puddle, tore my ACL, dislocated my knee, ripped all the meniscus cartilage off my bones, and actually bruised the bone ends. So that was the end of pole vault. But more importantly, that was the end of my lifestyle, my goals, my identity, it took a while to really dig in, about a year, and I was kind of in denial, and, on the surface, everything looked good, apart from obviously my knee was a coconut. And I became depressed, and I had to reassess, like, what am I? Because I'd identified myself, I can say now, too much with one specific thing. Like, I was a pole vaulter, and everyone introduced me as that. So when that was taken away, I didn't have the mental kind of strength to back it up with much else. I'd relied too much on my physicality, and I wasn't as mentally strong as I had thought, which you only really know when you're in the crap. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah, man, I have torn my ACL as well too, and it is not an easy injury to recover from. I mean, it's a good 9 months till you're really even close to being close to stuff. So, like, in 9 months of, like, especially you leading up to the Olympics, which is once every 4 years, I can really, I understand that identity kind of crisis. Who am I? Aspect of things. And it
was the cartilage as well was the worst part of it, kind of thing, because they repaired the ACL with a piece of my hamstring, and that actually was never a huge issue in the end because the cartilage was so bad, and that was the surgeon said it was like trying to sew wet spaghetti together. Yeah. So they had an operation to try and save it, and then 6 months later, it wasn't quite right. They had to go in and basically take majority of it all out. So it was the real mental side of it, was having to go back to square one. Yeah. If you do all this work and then they're like, we got to go back into the operation, and you've got to do, it's just rehab, prehab, crutches operation for about 2 years. And it just chipped away my mentality more than anything. And tough times.
So tough time, going through depression, trying to figure out what's going on. What, it took you a little while, but what do you think was the major point that made you kind of, hey, snap out of this, or you've got to do something different? Is there a time that you can think back to that was that major kind of focal point?
Yeah. Definitely. And it's the links back to why I'm really, one of the sort of angles I'm taking, at least the Awaken Your Alpha podcast is tied into this. Throughout the whole time when I was, struggling, I was really trying to get better. I never gave up, but it just wasn't working. It's almost like the more I tried, it just, I so wanted to feel better, and it just wasn't happening. So I stuck with it. And one of I say a minor thing, but I remember the day my first son was born, was in 2010. So, about 2 years after. And it was just a little extra thing to kind of slap you out of it, because the worst thing was you just can't get out of your own head. Yeah. It's all about you, and it becomes very, and even if you're aware of that, it's just very hard to get out of. But by having, that realization that, obviously you're not in a good spot, and I do not want to have any kind of influence like this around my son. Even if you're putting on, because around that stage, it was, it was an effort just to be what I would say even keel. Like, it's not like, just to have a small conversation or just small talk or just general things. That's a huge effort because you're feeling so crappy. And that was a real kick up the arse that, you know, this is not just going to have an impact on yourself, and to focus on something other than yourself was, you know, I hear entrepreneurs talk about, you know, kids are a bit of a hack sometimes. And from that sense, that just that little bit extra, just to, I don't know. And it wasn't an instant thing. Be realistic here. It was just, again, and a specific point of hitting the rock bottom where I couldn't deny it anymore. My mum kind of rumbled me in terms of she broke through the BS that I was saying. Yeah, I'm fine. That I started, you know, just getting gradually better. But I felt a lot better because I could sense and see that I was on the right path in terms of I was better than yesterday. Not a whole lot, but slowly getting it. And it took as long for me to drag myself out of that as it did to get down there.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, you know, we sometimes like to wallow in it, and sometimes when you're going through it, and it's touchy because people know you're going through it, and the first thing they ask you is, how's your knee? How's the rehab? And like, that's the last thing I really feel like talking about right now.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't want to talk about my failure, my injury. Let's find something else and move in that direction. You had your son. Hey, let's change the energy.
Yeah. I talk about it now, probably quite, you know, it seems not an issue, but I've talked about it many times. But, you know, I couldn't watch track and field for like 3 years or maybe even 4 years after that. And that's weird, but it didn't seem weird at the time. I just didn't want to be reminded of it. You know, it was just, obviously I had some issues around it. And it didn't get all like, oh, I went and then started writing books and podcasts. I was so obsessed of getting to the Olympics. Yeah, something changed. So it wasn't going to be through pole vault. I couldn't pole vault, but, you know, that's one thing. So I actually managed to get into the Great Britain sitting volleyball squad, you know, in the build up to 2012, because my knee was so messed up. I was, you know, invited to try out for some of the teams, and I got into that squad as a minimal disability athlete. But the reality was, even though I trained and gave it my all, every time a championships come around, I would get bumped out of the squad because there was only 2 spots for that position. And they happened to be, you know, I think it was Great Britain's greatest standing volleyball player we've ever had for 20 years, who was captain Great Britain. He would just walk into the squad, rightly so. But for me, I was like, ouch. And am I going to keep banging my head against the brick wall, or acknowledge, okay, you got to let this go. It's not going to happen. And it wasn't through like quitting, as it were, but it was just the reality that, and the sacrifice it would have taken. They wanted you to be kind of a professional, but amateur at the same time, if you get my drift. And I would have been just training fodder, because I was, you know, we did really well in training. And after a year or so, it very clear, no matter how well I did, I was going to get bumped as I did. And I do understand it. So that's why I moved away from that as well.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, that's the thing a lot of us face. Hey, we want to get somewhere, and you know, no matter how much heart we have, sometimes we just don't have the talent or have the things working for us. Not everything lines up to do it, because there's always sometimes limited spots out there. But that's a hard conversation to have with yourself. Like, listen, I've got to move on. And you couldn't obviously be a professional amateur. You've got a kid, you got a wife. This
is the stuff as well. It was, that really dawned on me when I'm traveling into London on the train midweek, missing my kid's bedtime. It's raining, it's dreary, it's dark. We go training, and the other kicker was, it wasn't fun training particularly. And I've always made my training, even to the high level, fun. And the Great Britain coach at the time, we had a difference of kind of approach. He was a very negative coach. And, you know, literally if you saw his players like laughing and having fun, it seemed, he would, you know, get on your case. So it was like a whole accumulation. And it's like, what am I doing? I'm doing this and missing out on this. And it was just time and time again, it just was not worth the sacrifice, which again, as someone, you know, if I set something and I'm going to do it, it's very hard to sometimes reassess and, you know, acknowledge that, okay, it's okay to be wrong, or not even wrong, that this is not worth the sacrifice. And reality, it's probably not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a tough conversation. That's tough to have. I mean, I think everybody goes through that at some point, no matter how successful or unsuccessful you are. Even the greats go through that, you know? And
you can let your ego get a hold of you. If I'd have stuck with that for another like 2 years to the Olympics, I knew it wasn't going to actually happen, but it would have been my ego, right, I'm going to follow through and kind of in some ways waste the next 2 years just because I said I would, you know, do it. which, yeah, so don't let your ego, get you into those sorts of situations. Just hold your hands up and reassess.
Right. So then what made you, once you came to this, okay, I've got to stop doing this. I got to do something different. What led to you deciding to write or come up with Awaken Your Alpha, the book?
Yeah. Well, again, it's around 2010, literally the day my son was born, I actually, I launched the UK Youth Conditioning Association because it was something that I'd been on my mind for years. And it dawned on me that, wait a minute, like, am I going to be one of them dads who tells, oh, I thought about doing this and why don't you do this? I had this great idea when I was like, whatever, but I didn't do anything with it. It dawned on me, if I'm not going to do it now, when will I do it? So again, that kind of kicked off that side of things. And I wrote a book around at the time called Fit Kid, Fat Kid. It never came out because I wrote this whole book and then I had an opportunity to be a co-author of a book. So I cut it down to a chapter. And then in 2013, that book came out, became a bestseller. And on the surface, again, I was like, what is the connection here? I had such a mix of authors, a 60-year-old dentist from South Africa, a 30-something-year-old teacher from England. It was just so random. And I was like, it's only when I met these people in person at an award ceremony, like much later, that I had these conversations. I was like, oh, I get it. I get the mindset. And I also, it's the success leaves clues kind of thing. And also how well I was getting on with these people. And I hadn't really had these kind of in-depth conversations in that way before. And that's when I had the idea that this needs to be shared in some kind of format. And I actually had the idea for a book kind of at the same time, if not before the podcast, but I wanted it to be like a legacy book and really dig into it and research it for years. So that's where the idea of the podcast, Awaken Your Alpha, came in as an elaborate research project for the book. And so I dug into that because, again, I was aware I didn't want to just set this 4-month or 4-year goal like the Olympics and get nothing of value in the meantime that it might not happen. So the podcast was a nice way to start sharing that instantly, but also researching the book. But again, it came to a time when do you pull the plug? Is 100 interviews enough? 200 interviews enough? 300 interviews enough? So, and I was in some ways initially naively maybe, I'll do the book once I land Arnold Schwarzenegger for the interview. And then there comes a point, right, maybe here I have to go in volume 2 or something. I've got like the quality is there and this is burn and I've got to get this out before, something happens to me. So yeah, around that time as well, I was still teaching at a college in South London 3 days a week. It meant like I was jumping off to, literally flying to the States Wednesday evening, landing Monday morning. I remember ridiculous when I landed Monday morning, drove straight from the airport to college because that's when we started Monday mornings with like a form time kind of thing where we all sat down and they'd say stuff like, oh, how was your weekend? And I would say the odd thing like, and obviously they're like, whatever, they don't, they didn't believe certain things. And I would just sort of hint at things, but they had no idea, but I was getting pulled in 2 different directions too much. I was an amateur entrepreneur and podcaster, and I was an amateur teacher because I wasn't full-time or professional in both. And that was a tough transition time. And again, all advice was, stick with, this transition and don't make the jump completely kind of. And at a certain point, I just had to make I had 2 children. I had to make the call. And that's when I launched the podcast. And just dove in because again, one of my big goals that I'd set was to move to the States, specifically in the middle of nowhere, up on the Grand Lakes in the wilderness. And I know the teaching jobs are there, but only when people die and retire. So podcasts can go anywhere. And, so that's one of the things I made the tough decision before I left in anticipation and then just been working at it. And it's, it's lots of ups and downs and tangents, but that's kind of I'm a fan of setting these kind of markers and then working out how on earth you can fill the gaps and transition and get in that direction.
So where's home? You said in the Great Lakes, but where at specifically? So
Rogers City, it's about 4.5 hours north of Detroit. It's a different world. It's more like Canada. I didn't even know it existed, but it's where my wife's mum is originally from. And we used to come visit in the summer, as most people do, but we stayed. And there's 0 crime here. My boys, it's a great place to bring them up. They can run wild, and it's beautiful. It's a little fresh at the moment, but I remember I'm coming from rain. So snow and sun is fun. Rain, not so much fun, in my opinion.
That's the truth. Now, with all the people that you've interviewed on your podcast and the book, have you found an identifiable like thread through them all of way how people really overcame things or really made a big pivot and overcoming obstacles, things? What's the kind of underlying factor that you've seen from all your interviews with your guests?
Yeah. Mission. Some kind of mission. And I know that the times in my life when I've struggled the most, or even when I've had a little bit of a wobble, is when that mission doesn't exist, or it's unclear to me, or it gets a bit, I'm not sure. And then you can either ignore that and just plow on in what you're doing, which is not a good idea, or you can stop and take the time to actually like, what's going on here? Why? And that's what I mean about reassessing. If I hadn't have reassessed, then I would have been head down and just focused on one thing, and then got to the end of it and realized actually this is not what I wanted. So I think having a clear mission, and again, however you want to phrase that for yourself in terms of what's important to you, what you're striving for, and that can be, doesn't have to be these, probably it shouldn't be these external things. It can be a mixture, but it could be your mission is to be like the best father ever. And then everything you do comes under that funnel. It runs through that filter, because everything you do, your daily habits, actions, or decisions, if someone says, oh, I've got this opportunity, will either move you towards your goal or align with your values or away from it. It's very unlikely and very hard to stay still and maintain. So I think that concept of everything you do is either a step closer or a step away is, for some people, not good to admit, because oh no, I'm just maintaining, I'm just ticking over. But you're either growing or you're dying in the most ruthless sense. So I think that's important to know which direction you're pointed. So, and that all comes from having a clear mission and reassessing that mission. You don't have to stick to a mission you set when you was 18 years old, because now, when you're older, you're sticking to basically a kid's naive opinion or goal. And so if you don't reassess, then, you likely will get there. Or if you do get there and realize it was a bit of a hollow one, or, it's not all you thought it was made up to be, or you didn't even think about it. You just followed this because either society or you as a younger person set this goal and haven't reassessed.
That's so true. Because I think if you don't have a clear why, clear direction, it's easy to very drift off and squander opportunities or squander your energy. Like you said, either going forward or you're kind of failing back. And that's a huge point. Everybody that's successful. I know you like to read like I do. One of my favorite books is Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. Have you had a chance to read that one?
No, I haven't.
Oh my gosh, I got to get you a copy.
Yeah, his main one, Think and Grow Rich, was the most recommended book in like over 350 shows. So that's the one everyone always mentions, but Outwitting the Devil. Ooh. It's
written by Napoleon Hill, but it's him having a conversation with the devil, asking the devil why he's so successful. He says, I'm successful because I get people to drift. People chase squirrels. They don't have a clear focus of where they want to go. So that makes a lot of sense with what you said there.
Yeah. I just wanted to say as well, something you said earlier that made me think about this New Year thing as well. It's why that's not such a big deal in my thoughts, because of I break it down to the daily. We sort about these daily actions, and also it's just another day, it's just another month. I like the fact that it gives people a slap around the face to think, okay, let's make some changes. But also, and I could feel some social, not pressure. It's like just a thought on myself where I had to question, because my parents were here for a month over Christmas. So really, if you want to think about everyone starting their year, I didn't start in a business or work sense till mid-January, which I'd planned. So it's not an issue. Right. I'd started my year with the most important things, family, for me anyway, family and spending that quality time. But I could feel towards the end of that, I felt like a little, I want to get back to stuff and I felt behind. And then I was at the question, well, I'm behind who? Behind what? Like, it's, you plan this because it's important. And then I realized it was only just the outside influence of, being aware of everyone starting the year right. And, I've done this in the first week of January, and feeling like that. obviously now looking at it now, a little element of trying to that comparing or just, I'm behind. I'm like, well, by whose marker, and also so that was weird. And I thought, oh my God, it's still can, you have to be aware of these things, still can get you. Mm-hmm. So, and that's purely, social conditioning and comparing your situation to others, which is a stupid thing to do. And so then I was like, well, wait a minute. I just checked myself. No, go and focus on what you know is important. And then as literally my year, if you want to look at it in that sense, started, January 14th. I had it on the calendar and I cracked on from there. But again, I had to, check myself to then relax and make the most and be present. Because again, that's another thing that is, I think, a big pitfall is, it's great to have family around, but if they're there and you spend the whole time thinking about your work day tomorrow, all these things you can do when they're gone, you're not present. And that's it's just such a shame.
Oh my gosh. I love what you just said there. That's such a truth. The keeping up with the Joneses, I say it's social envy that we see a lot of things, or I call it fake book a lot of times, because also a lot of people are getting their message, I'm so grander. I'm like, really? I'm like, no, that's the thing is we get so sucked into that. We're such a kind of, society, a facade in a lot of cases. And you're right. You're only really competing against yourself. You can't compete against somebody else because their situation is completely different.
Yeah.
You have that picture of the iceberg behind you, which I think is such a great analogy that we go through. Most people only see the success. They don't see all the stuff that goes into it and what we're dealing with on a day in, day out basis. Right.
Yeah, definitely. And, when someone blankets a statement of coming up, reaches out to me and says, "Oh, you've done all this, you're so successful, and how have you done?" And I'm like, I always, it doesn't feel right in my gut because, like you said, like the iceberg, that's not reality. And I'm like, why do you think that, or how do you know that? Because I've been here the whole time. That's not how it is. And I don't want to just sort of not address that with someone and say, "Oh, thanks." Because then it gives a false impression. And then someone might be striving for what they think I've got, which is not the reality. It's a pursuit. It's a daily kind of approach to life. And if you're not enjoying that, then you've got to make some changes. It doesn't justify, achieving great things if your daily work and habits and, presence and fulfillment is not there.
Such good stuff. And so many people fill things up with that time they can use for other profitable things or other meaningful things, family, whatever, with just stuff that's just a waste of time and not worth it. Would you mind sharing kind of what your mission is, what your goal is? I'm sure you've got one that's pretty clearly defined, hopefully.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, this is good. And this is useful talking it through because it is, to amplify your mission or to help people amplify their message, their mission. And that's where the kind of they go together in terms of, if on the podcasting sense, why I have these two podcasts, because Awaken Your Alpha is about amplifying your mission and really playing a bigger game and stepping up. And it's personal leadership show, book. It's all about that and taking responsibility. And obviously the TEDx side of things is specifically about amplifying your message. Which the two generally go together in terms of if you've got a clear mission and something you believe in, you're leading with that. And so in the specific kind of the TEDx platform is just a specific tool that is very efficient in getting that message out there to a wider audience and then opening certain doors that you can then just obviously smash through and take advantage of. But there's no, like anything, a podcast is not going to make everything magical. A TEDx is not going to make everything magical. I learned that with my first book. If you just write a book and put it out there and don't do anything with it, think, right, put your feet up, you've done a book. There's barely any point doing a book apart from it probably feels therapeutic to write it. But that's about it. It's just a tool. And, it's important to use these things properly to help you in your mission. So, in terms of the mindset,
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. You've got to put the things in place. And that's what I love about your TalkXcelerator is it's a different, most people are like, oh, hey, TED Talks, we're going to talk about our topic. Your show, that podcast is completely different. Share with our listeners out there about what's so great about that and kind of your focus and mission with the TalkXcelerator.
Yeah. So the last thing I wanted, as I talked about, just sort of touch on it. Last thing I wanted is another podcast. It doesn't make me a podcaster. You know, I'm an experienced podcaster. So I was reluctant to put it out in that format. I'm working with clients as the TalkXcelerator process and helping people land TEDx's and, you know, all the kind of insider stuff. And you learn from only going through it for years yourself and then helping people. So the podcast came off the back of, how can I make this such a valuable podcast before it's even launched for me and my clients first? And then also in getting that message out there, the whole point is its visibility as well. So as part of my process, I reach out for my clients to TEDx's events that they've identified are potentials for them in their area, or they're, you know, they've seen a theme. And then I have, again, I can't guarantee it because these are individuals, but generally I have an interview with that TEDx organizer and find out for them, like, what exactly are they looking for? What is the application? So it really gets specific and detailed. The Awaken Your Alpha, you know, I have a structure, but it's very conversation. Whereas the TEDx, or TalkXcelerator, I should say, is only about how to land the TEDx. Like, what are they looking for? The minor details that I said, if you're not into that, it's going to be a very boring show. And I only interview TEDx speakers and TEDx organizers on their experience and, you know, specifically like when things go wrong as well, because you always see the polished videos on YouTube, and I want to go kind of behind the red spot and what it took to get there and how you got there, and then also what impact has it had in your speakers' lives, what impact has it had in your life, why would you do it, why wouldn't you do it, all these minor things that you only learn from, you know, speaking to individuals. And I've got my opinions and my experiences which are valuable, but they're not everyone's. So that's where the variety comes in. And so I do these interviews, and they usually end up being, you know, 30, 40 minutes, and that goes, you know, straight into my members area, or, you know, my client may watch that before they apply. So kind of like that hack, and that's what it's all about. Just ways to increase your chances, because you definitely can't guarantee. And again, that's something I like about it. And then later down the line, an edited 18-minute, in line with TED's guidelines, 18-minute interview goes out. So it's really jam-packed, and then it flip-flops between an organizer and a speaker once a week. TEDx Tuesday, I call it. And there's a lot of value in that. And I understand that, you know, probably 95% of people are never going to work with me like directly or do the course and getting that support that way. But that is so valuable. And if that inspires someone to hear, oh, this is the reality, like we talked about, it's not all as shiny, and I am capable of that, and going and actually going out and get it, then, you know, I can't lose. And so it's putting a lot of value out there, but it also, it's visibility of the way, if someone wants to, you know, put their flag in the sand, right, this is the year. I'm not going to kind of just wishy-washy look for it. I'm going to, you know, listen and to this, because the podcast for people who've done it. And then actually, how can I make it happen quicker? Because I do believe everyone potentially can do it. It's just a question of when you have the time, because we're all busy, that you're doing A, B, C, and not all the things you could do, because there's a lot of things you could do. And so generally the people who work with me or go through the course, like we all are, it's hard to put getting that talk as a priority above, you know, family time or business time, because you don't generate revenue directly from it. So it always gets put on the back burner for people. And it's surprising how many people have come in who've, you know, it's been a thing for months or years, and it just keeps sliding, and it will never come to the point. So it's that level of accountability as well. So you can just, you know, make it a priority, just a small half hour a week, and then you know, land it, and then it happens. And then it's, you know, you'll get benefited from it now and going forwards, as opposed to something you do before you croak right near the end.
What's been the biggest impact from your talk that you had?
Good question. I used it straight away to a nice clear one in the same year it came out. When you reach out to, if you want to go down this route, and not everyone does, if you're looking to do more speaking events or gigs or whatever it is, I reached out. And again, if you know someone and your friends, or you've got a contact, that's great, but it doesn't mean they're confident in you as a speaker in that format. So straight away, I used that, and I ended up speaking, I think, within probably about 4 months, probably one of my most fancy venues. It was in the Roosevelt Hotel in Hollywood, where they held the first Oscars, and the venue is beautiful. And like the people who shot the video, it's like Emmy-winning directors. They've got it on, like, it looks awesome. So regardless of what I was saying, but no, and it was having gone through the TEDx as well, it was like a 10-minute format. So it stretched me again, but I'd obviously gone through that format. So I was way more relaxed than the TEDx because it didn't have the TEDx name associated to it, number two. And they were aware of me, but when I was looking into this, I just said, hey, obviously that's the question mark of, in that environment in front of 300 best-selling authors, it's, you know, quite a high-level event. It just removes the doubt. I sent my TEDx and said, hey, this is it. And and an organizer as well, they can put that, you know, there's a level of quality that comes associated with that. So they, you know, they can check it out. They did check it out. I'm pretty confident, but they may, who knows, they may have even just seen the, you know, the watched like 10 seconds of it just to see, oh, okay, I get it. They can see how it's going to transition. So that, you know, that's a real direct thing right after it. But it's opened, you know, so many doors. It's hard to, but that was one thing that's, you know, sticks in the mind. But again, you've got to use it then to leverage onto the next one, and yeah, that's something I'm always in the process of doing. But if anyone I'm interviewing, or if I'm potentially interviewing, if I see TEDx attached to their bio, I interview them for both shows generally as well, number one. But again, I do way less research, if any, because they're a TEDx speaker. So I know someone has taken the trouble, has selected them, and they've got an idea worth sharing that they can share in under 18 minutes, which for a podcast, I'm like, beautiful. To a certain extent, if I had to, I could just sort of sit back and say, tell us about your idea. And that would be the show filled. But I haven't been let down yet. I'm sure there's one or two out there who have done a TEDx talk where the quality is really not up there, but I haven't yet to experience that. And you're going to get the best from someone. And it takes a certain kind of mindset to go after a TEDx and dedicate that time to a message. It's just it's a stamp of quality, and it's so far, touch wood, it's holding true for, you know, everyone I've run into.
Yeah, I think that's with anything, you've got to spend some time and make it a focal point, whether it's a TEDx talk or working out or writing a book or doing something. You've got to set it as a priority versus, oh, I'll get to it later.
Yeah. That was my kind of the motivation behind the kind of the program and how it's evolved in the last sort of 18 months to make it excuse proof. Because if you almost leave one little door open, people go for that as an excuse. So it's just, it's got rock solid over the years.
What's the most surprising TED talk that you've heard, or a person you interviewed that really kind of stood out, was either opposite of what you thought or just something that just kind of set you back a little bit? I know I didn't ask you this beforehand, so I'm catching you on the spot here.
Yeah. Oh man.
Anybody that stands out?
A talk title I thought was really quite good and kind of fitted the person and just their whole vibe. And this, again, your TEDx talk doesn't need to be all and everything you're about. It can just be one aspect of you. And I think in making it unique, having met the gentleman, and you know who he is as well, and I mentioned him, but it was Dr. Morgan Oakes. His TEDx was learning the language of dude. And that was a surprise hearing that was his TEDx title before, because I'd met him first in person before I knew anything about him and how he carried himself and, you know, what he's about. He's a doctor as well. And he did have a little bit of, I think he was going surfing later the next day after the event. So he had a little bit of that vibe. So that was definitely authentic to him. And then you might assume that what is his talk going to be on? It might be something more highbrow or something like that. And then I absolutely loved it. I was pleasantly surprised when, you know, his talk was learning the language of dude. It just fitted with him and what it was all about. And also the TEDx has got to be something simple and catchy to understand. It's the best ones are taking something very complex and just simplifying it down into a how-to, or getting you curious and learning. And so I really like that one. And then there's been hundreds, but that I really liked, just that he was, again, confident enough to be, you know, this is my moment on the TEDx stage, and I'm going to go, you know, down that and have some fun with it. And that's my talk title, as opposed to trying to, you know, this is how clever I am and I've got all this, and having this complex title, which happens a lot. And I know TEDx organizers have to back people down and get back to the focus of what you're doing. It's not about you. Yeah, you get loads of great benefits from going through that process, but in the talk in the purest sense is an idea worth sharing and really focusing on having that impact in the world. And so people listen to it.
That's such a great point there. I totally agree. Don't overcomplicate it. Keep it simple. And that works a lot in a lot of places out there, not just speaking, but you and I both have seen speakers or people that have been on there that talk way above their audience. They don't keep it simple and they lose everybody in the first 5 minutes, whereas keeping it simple and having some fun with it can really drive in that, and not only increase the energy, but get the audience involved or the listeners involved more so.
Yeah. So. And I say this coming from my first TEDx talk, or it was Awaken Your Alpha, which again, if I had to run at it now, knowing what I knew, it wouldn't be Awaken Your Alpha. It would be literally one piece of it, really focused in. Again, I was 2016, so it was 4 years ago. And I assumed, again, always a mistake, never assume stuff, that we would work on that title a little bit more and it would get, more niche down. But again, every event's different, and that was not something in their process. They assumed I would work on it and vice versa. And the working title became the title. And Awaken Your Alpha is a cool podcast name. It's a cool book name. But in terms of a TEDx, if you're being specific, it's not specific enough. There's curiosity element to it. But they chucked up the whole thing. It's too long when they put like the subtitle. So, but these are minor things that, again, I help people avoid now because it's pitfalls. You're like, once it's happened, it's happened. There's not much you can do. But that's something, again, and mine was right up to the 18 minutes. Again, I know the next one I do will be closer to 10 because, again, if you can't say it in 10, a lot of people who you probably would have had for 10 minutes, are going to be lost no matter how good your talk is. By 15, they got busier, more things to do. And a 10-minute talk will take more time and effort to create than an 18-minute talk.
Mm-hmm. I think so too, because I've spoken at some events where I've made short appearances. And when you're a speaker, you like to talk, you like to hear your spell speed.
Oh, yeah.
You want to have points. 10 minutes, you better get to the point really fast and make things happen.
And I've had situations like that as well, where someone says, "Oh, you got 5 minutes," and you think, "Oh, brilliant! I just, that's no time. I just jump up there but that's the problem. It is no time. So it is very easy to tell yourself, oh, it's such a short talk. I'll just go and do, a broken down version of my hour long or my 30-minute kind of thing or like message. But, every second counts. And, it's important. And it stands out when someone has taken a little bit of prep. And, I'm not saying I do it all the time because you do get caught out when you have these short times and you ramble. And then someone goes, right, that's your time. Or like, and you're like, oh no, you've just used your 3 minutes to kind of just set up what you was about to say. Time's gone. Or something random happens, and you got distracted and you're like talking to an audience member and that's your time. Your time is time.
Good stuff. Well, I think that brings us to an end of our time. Out there, Adam. That's awesome. Once again, everybody, check out his podcast, Awaken Your Alpha, and then also the TalkXcelerator Podcast. Great stuff out there. Adam, you do an amazing job, and you can hear your passion for wanting to help people really take their stuff to the next level because you've gone through it. You've walked or pole vaulted over those hurdles in some cases. And I want to thank you for coming on the podcast today and sharing such great insights and great nuggets out there, man. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. And I say, in terms of Awaken Your Alpha, how we talked about just kind of really digging into and being authentic and true with things, that is moving more and more towards almost like it's been men's development focused podcast, but dad's development, because again, I say in a selfish sense, but that's what really interests me. And it's just chipping away. And these things take years of what's really important to you and being okay with the fact there's a lot of entrepreneurial shows out there. We still have lots of entrepreneurs, but just flipping it in more, focusing on the family side, the being a good dad side alongside entrepreneurs or professionals. And so, and all sorts, but that's something that's transitioning in 2020 more and more, and having that network of, committed dads like that.
I love it, man. I love it. Thanks so much for being here today, Adam. We'll see you later. All right.
Cheers.
Cheers. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Like he said, think back to that. What's your mission? What's your goal? What's your compass in directing you to where you want to be, and think about that. If you don't have direction, you don't have compass, it's okay to falter. We all falter, but keeping that something, that goal, you can keep that eye on the prize, eye on the mission, is going to help you get there a whole lot quicker versus just sitting around and letting the days eat you up. So go out, take some action, everybody, and we'll see you all at the top.